The author says, we're continuing here with the talk of Imam Al-Bayadhi, the Hanafi. ثم قال البياضي, then Al-Bayadhi said, الثانية إكثار من أطلق التشبيه والتحيز. The second is the ikfar. He says ikfar means deeming as a kafir. We usually say takfir. Sometimes they say ikfar. The second is the ikfar, the deeming of a kafir, the charge of blasphemy of man atlaqa tashbih is the charging of blasphemy for whoever speaks of comparing God to the creations. What tahayyuz, and whoever speaks of attributing containment to Allah. Al-Bayadhi, he already dropped Ibn Taymiyyah's name. Al-Bayadhi makes takfir on Ibn Taymiyyah, Al-Bayadhi the Hanafi, and he's correct. There's not any correct difference in opinion about Ibn Taymiyyah being a kafir. Rather, it's only possible that some scholars didn't know about his blasphemy, and otherwise he is a kafir. The author says, وَإِلَيْهِ أَشَارَ بِالْحُكْمِ الْمَذْكُورِ لِمَنْ أَطْلَقَهُ. That's what Abu Hanifa signaled to by the mentioned judgment for whoever says such a statement. Yani. So last week we read that Al-Bayadhi was explaining the words of Abu Hanifa when Abu Hanifa said, فَمَنْ قَالَ لَا عَارِفُ رَبِّي أَفِي السَّمَاءِ أَمْ فِي الْأَرْضِ فَهُوَ كَافِرٌ. Anyone who says, I don't know my Lord, is he in the sky or is he on the earth? Then he's a kafir. That's what Abu Hanifa said. And Abu Hanifa said, كَذَا مَنْ قَالَ إِنَّهُ عَلَى الْعَرْشِ. And likewise, anyone who says, he's over the arsh, وَلَا أَدْرِي, but I don't know. Al-arshu afi samai am fil ard. Is the arsh in the sky or is it on the earth? Abu Hanifa says this one's a kafir too. So then Al-Bayadhi, he started pointing out things. He said, وَفِيهِ إِشَارَات. There are pointers here, or points. Al-Ula, the first is أن القائل بالجسمية والجهة منكر وجود موجود سوى الأشياء التي يمكن الإشارة إليها حسا. The first pointer is that the one who bodifies God, the corporealist or the anthropomorphist, and the one who believes that God is in a direction, he is a denier of the existence of any existent one. Yani he denies that anyone would exist unless or except for things that can be physically pointed to. فَهُمْ مُنْكِرُونَ لِذَاتِ الْإِلَهِ الْمُنَزَّهِ عَنْ ذَلِكَ. And so they are therefore in reality deniers of God's self, the self that is exalted from that. فَلَزِمَهُمْ الْكُفْرُ لَا مَحَالَةً. And so blasphemy is bound to them most indubitably. ثُمَّ قَالَ الْبَيَاضِي. And then Al-Bayadhi said, الثانية, the second is what we just read here. The deeming as a kafir whoever pronounced or spoke of comparing God to the creation, and whoever spoke of God being contained. And that's what Abu Hanifa signaled to by the judgment that's mentioned for whoever said such things. وَاخْتَارَهُ الْإِمَامُ الْأَشْعَرِي. And that's what Imam al-Ash'ari chose. Yani, I haven't heard that Al-Bayadhi is a Maturidi, but he's a Hanafi and he's explaining the works of Abu Hanifa So usually a Hanafi is going to be a Maturidi in creed. But it's possible for a Hanafi to be an Ash'ari in creed. Just like it's possible for a Shafi'i or a Maliki or a Hanbali to be a Maturidi in creed. And in fact, some scholars like our Shaykh and like Muhammad Murtada Az-Zabidi said, every Ash'ari is a Maturidi and every Maturidi is an Ash'ari. So maybe Al-Bayadi is a Maturidi, and we can ask just to get it verified. And here he is citing Imam al-Ash'ari. He says, وَاخْتَارَهُ الْإِمَامُ الْأَشْعَرِي. That's what Imam al-Ash'ari selected. Yani that's the position that he took. فَقَالَ فِي النَّوَادِرِ. He said in his book An-Nawadir, مَنْ اعْتَقَدَ أَنَّ اللَّهَ جِسْمٌ فَهُوَ غَيْرُ عَارِفٍ بِرَبِّهِ. Whoever believed that Allah is a body, then he is unfamiliar with his Lord. وَإِنَّهُ كَافِرٌ بِهِ. Yani he doesn't know his Lord. And indeed, he is a disbeliever in him. كَمَا فِي شَرْحِ الْإِرْشَادِ. كَمَا فِي شَرْحِ الْإِرْشَادِ. Just like it's documented in the explanation of Al-Irshad. لِأَبِي قَاسِمٍ الْأَنصَارِي. This explanation that's by Abu Qasim al-Ansari. And Al-Irshad itself is by Imam al-Haramain, rahimahumullah ta'ala. وفي الخلاصة أن المشبه إذا قال له تعالى يد ورجل كما للعباد فهو كافر. And in the book Al-Khulasa, it's documented that if the anthropomorphist said, or when he says that he, the exalted, has a hand and a foot like the slaves, then he is a disbeliever. Intaha, end quote. ثم قال, and then Al-Bayadi said, الرابعة, the fourth, الرد على من أنكر إكفار المشبه مطلقا. Very good. Yani, this one's a guided scholar here. He says the fourth is the rejection or the refutation of whoever denies the charge of blasphemy for the one who likens Allah to the creations. So that's the case of some people not making takfir on Ibn Taymiyyah, though they know his case. مطلقا, absolutely. ذهابا إلى أن القائل بأنه جسم غالط فيه غير كافر. Hold on. Taking the position that whoever says so, whoever said that he's a body is mistaken. He's mistaken about it. Not a kafir. لأنه لا يطرد قوله بموجبه. Because, according to this one, because what he says is not consistent with what it dictates. What he means is, he's saying, because he doesn't really know what jism means. He might not know what jism means, what body means, when he says God is a body. كما اختاره الباقلاني كما في شرح الإرشاد. And this is the position taken by Al-Baqillani, like what's in the explanation of Al-Irshad. واختاره الآمدي في الأبكار. And Al-Amidi took this position in his book Al-Abkar. فقال في خاتمته. He said in the conclusion of that book, إنما يلزم التكفير أن لو قال إنه جسم كالأجسام. One is only the charge of blasphemy is only binding had he said he's a body like bodies, like other bodies. وَلَيْسَ كَذَلِكَ. And this is not the case. Yani, that's not true, that the charge of blasphemy is not binding if he merely says God is a body, and it's only binding if he says God is a body like other bodies. That's not true. بل ناقض كلامه أو كلامه بل ناقض كلامه في فصل التنزيه منه وفي المنائح. In fact, Al-Amidi contradicted himself. And he said what's contrary to that in the chapter of At-Tanzih from the same book. وَمِنَ الْمَنَائِحِ, and also he contradicted what he said in another book of his called Al-Mana'ih, حَيْثُ قَالَ فِيهِ, where he said, وَمَنْ وَصَفَهُ تَعَالَى بِكَوْنِهِ جِسْمًا مِنْهُمْ وَمَنْ وَصَفَهُ تَعَالَى بِكَوْنِهِ جِسْمًا, whoever describes him, exalted is he, as a body. مِنْهُمْ مَنْ قَالَ إِنَّهُ جِسْمٌ, some of them say he's a body, a mawjud, and they mean he exists, لَا كَالْأَجْسَامِ, not like bodies. He's saying some of them say he's a body not like other bodies, and they mean he exists not like bodies. So he's talking about ignorant people here, not knowledgeable people. And this is very ignorant, because this is even ignorance of the language here, let alone having studied properly after that. كَبَعْضِ الْكَرَّامِيَّةِ, like some of the Karramiyah. They're ignorant laymen. Some of them said, he's a body not like other bodies, and they don't know what body means. They think body means existing or existent. It doesn't mean that. وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ قَالَ إِنَّهُ عَلَى صُورَةِ شَابٍ أَمْرَدٍ. Some of those people who believe that God is a body said that he has the image of a young man without facial hair. وَمِنْهُمْ مَنْ قَالَ عَلَى صُورَةِ شَيْخٍ أَشْمَطٍ. And some of them said he has the image of an old man with peppered hair. وَكُلُّ ذَلِكَ كُفْرٌ وَجَهْلٌ بِالرَّبِّ. So Al-Amidi says, and all of that is blasphemy and ignorance about the Lord. وَنِسْبَةٌ لِلنَّقْصِ الصَّرِيحِ إِلَيْهِ تَعَالَى. And it is attributing explicit deficiency to him. Exalted is he. عَنْ ذَلِكَ عُلُوًّا كَبِيرًا. Exalted is he from that with great exaltation. انتهى كلام البياضي. That's the end of the discourse of Al-Bayadi, but we have some footnotes here. So let's back up here. He says, so Al-Bayadi says that Al-Amidi said in Al-Abkar in the conclusion of the book that the takfir, the charge of blasphemy, is only binding had one said he's a body like other bodies. And this is not the case. In fact, Al-Amidi, he contradicted his own words. Here, footnote. Al-Amidi, I'll just translate directly into English. Al-Amidi, he went against his own words. Now, he contradicted himself. In one place of his book, Al-Abkar, in Al-Abkar, he said something, and in the same book, he said something that contradicts what he said. And likewise, in his other book called Al-Mana'ih, he contradicted what he said in Al-Abkar. He said the right thing in his book Al-Abkar and in his book Al-Mana'ih, but in his book Al-Abkar, he has a wrong statement. So his wrong statement is contradicted by his other statements that he said. لأنه في موضع قال, because in one spot he said, whoever said that Allah is a body not like other bodies does not blaspheme. And the only reason he doesn't deem him as a kafir in this case, when he says a body not like other bodies, because that's blasphemy really. The only reason why Al-Amidi is not deeming him as a kafir for this statement, a body unlike other bodies, is because he takes that statement to mean that this person thinks that this means that Allah exists and doesn't resemble other existing things. He's saying this one who said he's a body unlike other bodies, he thinks this means Allah exists not like other things, and that he is not something with volume, or he is not a volume like volumes. So that's wrong, Yani. Rather, what's correct is to say, whoever says Allah is a body unlike other bodies blasphemes, unless he doesn't know what it means. Not that whoever says Allah is a body unlike other bodies doesn't blaspheme because he doesn't know what it means. So this is what he said in one spot. And his phrasing is incorrect. And what's correct is that whoever said that Allah is a body not like the bodies blasphemes. And whoever says Allah has a body and he's silent, he doesn't add more, he blasphemes without any talk, without any discussion, according to the people of the truth. Yani, if someone said Allah has a body, he's a kafir. If someone said Allah has a body unlike other bodies, he's a kafir too. But if he doesn't know what these words mean, then he won't be a kafir, meaning if he thinks those words mean he exists unlike other things exist, then he won't be a kafir, and we'll teach him and we'll forbid him from saying that. And this is what is dictated by the talk of An-Nawawi and Al-Majmu'. That's correct. And Ibn al-Humam was explicit about that in Fath al-Qadir. And the Wahhabis are against what we are saying. And the rest of their fellow anthropomorphists. And that's because they believe that Allah is a real body in a direction which is up, and that he moves, and that he's still. And they believe in other things about God that are attributes of bodies. And when they say not like other bodies, that's just camouflage, pure camouflage, so that people will not object to them. So that's that footnote. And then there's a second footnote here. Al-Amidi said in the chapter of At-Tanzih from the same book, Al-Abkar, here's a footnote. It is said to them, what prevents the sun from being God according to what you say? In fact, the sun, according to what you say, is most entitled to be a god, because the sun is a body that is witnessed, and it is beautiful in shape, and its benefit is enormous. And as for this thing that you speak of, that it's a body that's dwelling over the Arsh, we never saw it, and you never saw it, and we never saw any benefit from it, and you never saw any benefit from it. So according to what you say, the sun is better to be a god. You don't have any answer, because they believe that God is a body. It is said to them, what's necessary is that Allah would not be a body, and that he would not be contained in a direction, any direction, and that he would not be limited, meaning that he does not have a measure, because everything that has a measure is created. Just like Allah Ta'ala said, وَكُلُّ شَيْءٍ عِنْدَهُ بِمِقْدَارٍ. Everything of His has a measure. Yani, everything that Allah created has a measure. The Arsh has a limit that Allah knows, and the sky and the earth and the sun and the moon and the human all have a limit. And the mustard seed has a limit, meaning a measure, a small measure. All of these creations are eventual. And it is not valid that any of them would be a creating God of something else. How could a body create a body? This question, how could a body create a body? That's a rhetorical question. What it really means is a body could not create a body. But let's keep it in form of a question. How could a body create a body? The one who understands this question clearly, then he's the one with good belief and clear mind. Otherwise, if you take someone like a Christian, he believes that a body could create a body. And even things that are depicted in movies and cartoons, they believe that a body can create a body. But a body cannot create a body. Remember, creating means to bring into existence by mere will. To will something into existence. According to what the Wahhabis say, Allah is a body. So how would He, if He's a body, create this Arsh and create these heavens, these 7 heavens, and this earth, and this sun, and this moon, and these stars? Those people don't have any minds. So that's a commentary from the Shaykh here. And this commentary was put here, this footnote. It doesn't have to be right here, because that commentary is not special to whatever Al-Amidi said in the chapter of At-Tanzih. That book we cited called Al-Khulasa, that's a book by some of the Hanafis. Thought I had a note here. Yani, what I remember is that this talk in this footnote here is the Shaykh's talk. Yani, because I just said it's not relevant to exactly what's in the chapter of At-Tanzih in Al-Amidi's book. Unless that's actually Al-Amidi's quote, but doesn't say that it is. Or else it would have said, call Al-Amidi, for example. So as I remember, this is Shaykh's quote. And therefore, then, it's not necessary that it's here. But let's continue. قال الحافظ ابن حجر في شرح البخاري ما نصه. Hafiz ibn Hajar said in the explanation of Al-Bukhari, quote, فمعتقد سلف الأئمة وعلماء السنة من الخلف. The conviction of the predecessors of the Imams, yani the early Imams, and the conviction of the scholars of the prophetic way from the latter day generations, is أن الله منزه عن الحركة والتحول والحلول, is that Allah is clear of motion and relocating or transforming, changing and dwelling. ليس كمثله شيء. Unlike Him, is there anything? So someone recently asked me, what's the creed of An-Nawawi and Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani? So I told him, they are Ash'aris, they are known Ash'aris. He said to me, but the Wahhabis say differently. They claim they're not. Well, their books are loaded with Ash'ari creed, like this statement here. Fathul Bari, the explanation of Al-Bukhari, is loaded with all this talk we're talking now. Also, An-Nawawi's explanation of Sahih Muslim. And there are other books too. An-Nawawi also has Al-Maqasid, which is like a book of obligatory knowledge. Maybe it's little more than obligatory knowledge. And has Aqidah section. It's all of what we are saying. So Wahhabis are mad gaslighters. Yani, they just try to make what's true seem like it's not true. وقال الإمام أبو القاسم الأنصاري وقال الإمام أبو القاسم الأنصاري النيسابوري. And Imam Abu al-Qasim al-Ansari al-Naysaburi said, شارح كتاب الإرشاد, the explainer of the book of Al-Irshad li-Imam al-Haramain, by Imam al-Haramain. So we already cited him in his book, Yani al-Bayaldi did. Now we're going to cite him ourselves. That is, the Shaykh is going to. بعد كلام في الاستدلال على نفي التحيز في الجهة عن الله تعالى. After some discourse about proving that proving the negation of containment in a direction from God, exalted is He. ما نصه, quote, ثم نقول, we furthermore say, سبيل التوصل إلى درك المعلومات الأدلة دون الأوهام, the way to arrive at the realization of knowable things is evidence, not delusions. وَرُبَّ أَمْرٍ يَتَوَصَّلُ الْعَقْلُ إِلَى ثُبُوتِهِ مَعَ تَقَاعُدِ الْوَهْمِ عَنْهُ. There are many a matter that the mind can arrive at its confirmation, though the delusion is crippled from it. Yani, there's many things that you can arrive at by your mind, although you can't imagine it or imagine them. وَكَيْفَ يدرك العقل موجودا يحاذي العرش مع استحالة أن يكون مثل العرش في القدر أو دونه أو أكبر منه. And how would the mind realize some existent thing parallel to the Arsh, while it's impossible that this existent thing would be similar to the Arsh in size, or smaller than it, or bigger than it? How could the mind realize this? Yani, if someone says, Allah is over the Arsh, then we say to him, you are actually comparing Allah to the Arsh itself. When we tell him you're comparing Allah to the creations, he'll say, no, I'm not. We tell him you're comparing him to the Arsh itself by saying he's over the Arsh. He'll say, no, I'm not comparing Allah to the Arsh. He's going to justify what he says by saying, Allah said he's over the Arsh. So we're going to say to him, but if that's what it means, then it means he's comparable to the Arsh. So it must not mean that. So he's going to deny that it's comparable to the Arsh. So then if we said to him, if he's over the Arsh, as you claim, then it means he either has the same size as the Arsh, or he's bigger than it, or he's smaller than it. So if he were to say, no, all of that's impossible, then this is what Al-Ansari here is saying. He's saying, how could the mind realize something that's parallel to the Arsh, while it's impossible that it's the same size as the Arsh, or smaller than it, or bigger than it? If it's parallel to the Arsh, if it's across from the Arsh, like it's over the Arsh, then it has to be the same size as the Arsh, or smaller than it, or bigger than it. It can't be none of those and still be over the Arsh. وَهَذَا حُكْمُ كُلِّ مُخْتَصٍ بِجِهَةٍ. This is the judgment of everything that is special to a direction. Because according to you, Wahhabi, God is special to the direction of up. So they don't use their minds, we know that. ثُمَّ نَقُولُ, we furthermore say, الجوهر الفرد لا يتصور في الوهم. The indivisible atom cannot be imagined in delusion. وهو معقول بالدليل, though it is rational by evidence. I have a footnote here. The Shaykh says here in this footnote, the indivisible particle Yani, the atom, the real atom, the unsplittable piece. It is a volume, something of volume, meaning it fills a space. Lakin, he says, but it doesn't have length, width, or depth. It doesn't have length, width, or depth. Some scholars said length, width, and depth won't be achieved until 8 particles come together. He says, this is unimaginable. However, the people of the truth believe in it. So, before I continue, how's that? There won't be length, width, and depth until 8 particles come together. So, some of them say, some of the scholars of Ahlul Sunnah say, the mere atom is just a speck. And if you put another atom with it, then that's a line. And then if you put with this line another line, that means 2 more atoms, then you have a surface without depth. So you have length and width and you don't have depth. So if you bring 4 more, then you'll get depth. So that's 8 particles or 8 atoms. This dust that the mind imagines, though it is the smallest thing, yani, it is the smallest thing that we can see by the naked eye. This dust, yani, the dust that you see when the sun shines through, we can imagine that dust because we can see it. It is the smallest thing that we can see with our naked eyes. And the atom is even smaller than that. It is so small that it doesn't even have length, width, and depth. This is something that the mind cannot imagine, although it is created. This creation is not imagined by the mind. So how about the creator himself? There's a creation that can't be imagined. So how about the creator? How would he be imaginable? The Shaykh here makes dua for Dhunnun al-Misri. He says, may Imam Dhunnun al-Misri be rewarded with goodness for this phrase that he said, Mahma tasawwarta bi balik, fallahu bi khilafi dhalik. Whatever you imagine in your mind, Allah is different from that. Because by this wording, he has made the absolute exaltation of God easy for the people to conceive. Back to the words of Abul Qasim al-Ansari. He says, وَكَذَلِكَ الْوَقْتُ الْوَاحِدِ. Likewise, the single indivisible moment of time. This is something unimaginable, but the mind can conceive it. وَالْأَزَلُ وَالْأَبَدِ. And eternity and everlastingness is unimaginable. Eternity is unimaginable. That means beginninglessness is unimaginable, but the mind confirms it. Wal-abad, and everlastingness. Everlastingness is unimaginable, but the mind conceives it. It's not irrational. It's unimaginable, and it's not irrational. وَكَذَلِكَ الرُّوحُ عِنْدَ مَنْ يَقُولُ إِنَّهُ جِسْمٌ. And likewise, the soul, according to whoever says that the soul is a body. We have a footnote here, which is correct. The soul is a body. But why is he saying it's unimaginable? I don't know. I asked, I didn't get an answer. Is it unimaginable because we never saw it, and therefore you can't imagine it? Because you can't imagine something that your senses have never experienced. وَمَنْ أَرَادَ تَصْوِيرَ الْأَرْضِ وَالسَّمَاءِ مَثَلًا فِي نَفْسِهِ. And if someone wanted to imagine heavens and earth in himself, for example, فَلَا يَتَصَوَّرُ لَهُ إِلَّا بَعْضُهَا. Only some of it will be imagined for him. Only the picture of some of it will come to him. He won't be able to imagine all of heavens and earth, although the entirety of heavens and earth is confirmed It has an entirety. وَكَذَلِكَ تَصْوِيرُ مَا لَا نِهَايَةَ لَهُ مِنْ مَعْلُومَاتِ اللَّهِ تَعَالَى وَمَقْدُورَاتِهِ. And likewise, envisioning or imagining or depicting what is endless in God's knowledge and what is endless and the endless possibilities under his power. That's rational. We conceive that God knows what is endless. He has absolute knowledge of what is endless. But we can't imagine that. And he has power to do anything possible. So the endless possibilities under his power. He could, we started. He could create a cyclops. He could create a triclops. Etc. And then you can keep going. He can create anything possible. We cannot imagine all of that, but it's rational. فَإِذَا زَالَتِ الْأَوْهَامُ عَنْ كَثِيرٍ مِنَ الْمَوْجُودَاتِ. And so, if imagination is inapplicable to many existing created things, فَكَيْفَ يُطْلَبُ بِهَا الْقَدِيمُ. How then would the eternal be sought by the imagination? Subhanah, exalted is he, far from imperfection is he. Alladhi la tushbihuhu al-makhluqat. The one that the creations do not resemble him. فَهُوَ سُبْحَانَهُ لَا يُتَصَوَّرُ فِي الْوَهْمِ. And so he, the glorified, is not imagined in delusion. فَإِنَّهُ لَا يُتَصَوَّرُ إِلَّا صُورَةٌ. For indeed, nothing is depicted but a picture. وَلَا يُتَقَدَّرُ إِلَّا مُقَدَّرٌ. And nothing is measured but what is measured. That's how it translates. The meaning is, here in the footnote, something that doesn't have a measure could not be measured in the mind. The mind imagines things. So this is words of the Shaykh in different spots. He says, the mind imagines. I want to ask about this. This is what the Shaykh is saying. He says the mind imagines things. The mind imagines something that has a measure, a limit, either a small volume or a big volume, depending on the varying measures of volume. But something that's not a volume, neither subtle like light, nor dense like a stone, doesn't have a measure. So then the imagination cannot realize it and cannot depict it. Back to the words of Al-Ansari. قال الله تعالى, said Allah the Exalted, لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. Unlike him is there anything. وَمَنْ لَا مِثْلَ لَهُ لَا يَتَمَثَّلُ فِي الْوَهْمِ. Anyone who doesn't have a similar couldn't take shape in the imagination. فَمَنْ عَرَفَهُ عَرَفَهُ بِنَعْتِ جَلَالِهِ. So anyone who knew God, he didn't know God by imagining him. He knew God by his description of greatness. بِأَدِلَّةِ الْعُقُولِ. By intellectual evidence. وَهِيَ الْأَفْعَالُ الدَّالَّةُ عَلَيْهِ وَعَلَى صِفَاتِهِ. Intellectual evidence that uses as a premise God's doings. His doings that prove his existence and his attributes. Yani his creations. وَقَدْ قِيلَ فِي قَوْلِهِ تَعَالَى. And it was said about the interpretation of God's word. وَأَنَّ إِلَىٰ رَبِّكَ الْمُنْتَهَى. That means, if I try to translate it literally, and to your Lord is the extent. What does that mean? إِلَيْهِ انْتَهَى فِكْرُ مَنْ تَفَكَّرَ. The thought of anyone The idea of anyone who thought ends and doesn't reach God. هذا قول أبي ibn Ka'b. This is the interpretation of Ubay ibn Ka'b for this ayah. Abdurrahman ibn Abi Nu'm, as well as Abdurrahman ibn Abi Nu'm. Footnote says, Abdurrahman ibn Abi Nu'm, he's the one that Al-Hajjaj imprisoned for 15 days. And he assigned for him to not get any food or drink, and the door was sealed, like there's no door there. So then he opened up the door after 15 days. What he said was, take him out and bury him. فَوَجَدَهُ قَائِمًا يُصَلِّي. When they opened the door, they found him standing there praying, so they let him go. وروى أبي بن كعب عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم لا فكرة في الرب. And Ubay ibn Ka'b narrated from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that he said, there is no thought about the Lord. There's no idea about the Lord. So that means like all of what we've been explaining. وروى أنس أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال. And Anas reported that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, إذا ذكر الله تعالى فانتهوا. If God Almighty is mentioned, then hold back. وقال. And the Prophet said, according to the author Al-Ansari, but this is not a statement of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. This is the statement of Ibn Abbas. But Al-Ansari says, the Prophet said, تَفَكَّرُوا فِي الْخَلْقِ وَلَا تَتَفَكَّرُوا فِي الْخَالِقِ. Think about the creation and don't think about the creator. Please, we should stop there. This is a good place to stop so that we can start the next section. Yani the next paragraph, the next coming paragraphs, inshallah.
Shaykh Ra'id,
Yes.
do you mind repeating what you said about the 8 particles?
Yes. No, I don't mind. So some said length, width, and depth are not achieved until 8 particles or 8 atoms come together. They said the single atom is a mere speck. If another atom joins with it, then that's a line. Yani, that's a length. That's a length. So 2 particles makes a length. And then in order to get width, you need 2 more particles, meaning another line. Put that line with the first line. Now you have length and width. And by having length and width, you get a surface, but there's no depth. So 4 particles makes a surface. And then in order to achieve depth, you need 4 more particles. So the total is 8 atoms. So some of them said by 8 atoms, you get length, width, and depth.